What's up, dude? How's it going?
How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the Vanguard. Thanks so much for tuning in this morning. We got a super special interview. Everyone's favorite DC bureau chief of the Intercept, Mr. Ryan Grim, is going to be joining us shortly. We got a lot to get into today. Obviously, if you've watched the Vanguard, you know that we have a significant amount of disagreements with Mr. Grim, but we also really respect his work in many regards as well. So we're super excited for this conversation, and we're hoping to specifically start off by talking at least about the infrastructure package and Bernie Sanders' role as the Senate budget chief and all that stuff, because Ryan's really been following that beat pretty well. And I think he has some interesting opinions that I both want to challenge and get his opinion further on. So again, we're really excited for this chat. I hope you guys are, excited to hear this conversation. But yeah, thanks so much for tuning in, everyone. Obviously this is the Vanguard. If you're tuning in for the first time, we cover lefty politics here. We cover a lot of internet lefty stuff. We cover candidates, interview people, etc. It's all here. It's all good. So make sure to subscribe if you're new. But what's up with you, Zach?
Yeah, just kind of echoing a lot of the sentiments that you said, Gavin. Really excited to talk to Ryan Grim about the infrastructure bill. I have a little bit of more skeptical opinions about it than he does, so I'm excited to kind of flesh it out, learn a little bit more. This obviously, for people who have been living under rocks, aren't super familiar with Ryan Grim's lengthy work in politics. Obviously we've had a few fucking strategical disagreements with the guy, but this is a dude that's put in, fucking a long years and years and years of work on the Hill as a progressive reporter. He knows how the sausage is made. He can explain a lot of the legislation, the bills to us in a way that Gavin and I just aren't quite wonky enough to get down into the dirt of. Like I said, we're just fucking two dudes talking shit. This is a guy that's, spent his life basically cutting his teeth on the Hill and building up a career and a relationship with all of these individuals. And it's good to get his perspective. So we're really excited to, learn and glean some of his reporting. So it should be a good chat.
Yeah, absolutely. And it looks like Ryan just entered the room while he's getting ready. I did want to play a few minutes of this recent segment from The Hill. Obviously, Ryan's still doing some occasional co-hosting on the Rising with The Hill. And this particular segment caught my eye and actually made me decide to message Ryan and ask him if he'd be interested to come on and talk about it. Because again, there's some really interesting assertions he makes here, some notions that we're going to challenge, but also maybe agree upon, who knows. But anyway, let's get into this a little bit, take a look at this segment, about 3 minutes of it, before we invite Ryan on to discuss the infrastructure deal and more in greater depth.
Democrat budget negotiators have agreed to a top-line budget resolution figure of $3.5 trillion, greenlighting the reconciliation process. A lot of details on this came in last night. The plan advances Biden's top economic priorities and includes funding for climate change, childcare, and Medicare expansion. Ryan, what's your reaction to this news? It seems like, at least from the left's perspective, this is quite a breakthrough.
Well, it's extraordinarily vindicating of a decade plus of criticism that the progressive wing of the party has been delivering to the establishment wing. And it is an acceptance of the premise that more is possible. When Barack Obama and Rahm Emanuel confronted the financial crisis in 2009, Rahm Emanuel told him there's no way you can get anything with a T through Congress. As a result of that, everything has fallen apart since then. I think that the kind of rise in hostility toward institutions, the millions of people losing their homes and their jobs over the last 10 years, the fabric of our society being pulled apart goes back to Obama's decision not to go big after the financial crisis, not to go after Wall Street, and not to go hard toward a recovery for the middle class and for the working class, and instead allowing all of the gains to flow to the top. That has been a central focus of left-wing criticism and right-wing populist criticism since then. And now here we are with not just a T, but 4 Ts, if you count the bipartisan package that is supposed to be finished negotiated by Thursday. So, right, what happened between 2009 and 2021? What changed in that period that led to some of the same figures, Mark Warner, Chuck Schumer, coming out and talking about a $3.5 trillion infrastructure spending bill. Nancy Pelosi, all in on it.
Joe Biden.
Right, Joe Biden all in on it. You have, in 2015, when Bernie Sanders runs for president, nobody thinks he has a shot. Instead, all of these people whose lives were destroyed by the financial crisis are like, I'm with this guy. We need a fundamental reckoning with our system for president. And I know that there are a lot of people out there, many of whom will be watching this program, who are extremely frustrated both at the squad and at Bernie Sanders for not fighting hard enough for the priorities that they've run on. And I think that there is some not just legitimacy to that point, but I understand like where that anger, where that frustration is coming from. But those people should also be proud at the same time of what they've accomplished. Like they have so fundamentally changed the game that you have places like Politico saying that a $3.5 trillion deal is a blow to Bernie Sanders.
Yes, exactly.
Like people need to take a beat and just recognize how much they've accomplished in such a short amount of time. It's not enough to get us everywhere we need to go, but it's a sea change.
Senate Democrat budget negotiators have agreed to a...
So yeah, how's it going, Ryan? Thanks so much for joining us.
Good. How you guys doing?
Doing great. So we were just playing this clip for our audience, the clip that kind of spurred us to ask you to come on for this conversation, because you've been following this infrastructure package and this infrastructure deal negotiations pretty closely. And in that clip we just played, you kind of addressed the people, a lot of whom are probably in our audience, that feel kind of let down by the Bernie Sanders / Justice Democrats progressive movement. Which was, of course, ascendant up until recently when Biden, ultimately got the nomination and crushed the political revolution of Bernie Sanders. A lot of people, myself included, I think Zach included, feel somewhat let down, like you mentioned. But in that clip, you make the case that Bernie's playing the long game actually resulted in more than just incrementalism. It actually resulted in this sea change, as you put it. So before we get into it more, I just want you to again address maybe our viewers, a lot of whom definitely do not agree with you on that. And again, just make the case for why you think Bernie playing the long game has been successful, why you think it's paid off, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and not just Bernie playing the long game, but all of your viewers, all of the people, who were active in the Sanders campaign in 2015 and 16, who then stayed active, and there were a ton of insurgent, progressive primary challengers in 2017 and 2018 that lost. Like, we know who the squad is because those are the ones that won. But there were, hundreds of thousands of people all over the country who, threw their hearts and souls into primary campaigns. Some of them lost by 50 points. Some of them lost by just a couple thousand votes. Those mattered too. And then for all of the people who, participated in the Bernie Sanders campaign again, 2019 and 2020, giving the establishment the absolute scare of its life. Just think back to the night of Nevada after Bernie wins Iowa, New Hampshire, and then Nevada, and MSNBC, they nearly had to pull the plug on it. Just take those people off the air. And in fact, Chris Matthews did get fired.
He made the brown shirts comment, right?
Yes, which actually, I thought it was a fine comment. Yeah, okay, you shouldn't bring up, like, don't make Nazi comparisons. Like, just don't do it. It's not going to work. But his point was, I thought, a sound one, which was that the French, forget they're Nazis. The French are going up against the French establishment, going up against their opponent, and they've got this Maginot Line. They believe that they have set up defensive walls that are going to protect them, no matter what. And I forget exactly the story he told, but somebody from Paris was like, "It's over." Like, and the guy's like, what do you mean it's over? Like, it just started. He's like, no, it's over. And so, and that was that was how the establishment was thinking of Nevada, that they were like geared for this like long-term guerrilla campaign, and they were going to fend off these insurgents. And then all of a sudden, boom, he wins these 3 states, and now he's polling really well in South Carolina, and he's polling ahead in Super Tuesday, and it's over. What happened? Like, their heads were spinning. And then with this Herculean effort on the part of Obama and Clyburn and MSNBC and CNN, and people can't underestimate the strength of cable news, because I saw the number. They got some extraordinarily like massive like amount of free media, because it wasn't just that Clyburn and Buttigieg and everybody
came out right after South Carolina. Yeah, it was over.
But that was broadcast on a loop by CNN and by MSNBC to make sure that everyone in the suburbs and everyone watching, got the message. Like it's over. Like you might have liked Klobuchar, you might have liked Mayor Pete. We don't care who you're into. Biden's the guy. Everybody get behind Biden. And and what people think that Biden won on the back of like a surge of like black turnout in South Carolina. Black turnout did not go up in South Carolina. It was white turnout that surged in the suburbs, because all these people were becoming Democrats in the suburbs. So actually it was white people in South Carolina.
That's kind of like the Virginiafication of America, right? Like this new PMC kind of suburbanite will change the makeup of the electorate in a specific state that was typically, either purple or red.
Right.
I did want to zoom out just a second for you at the beginning or for all of our audience as well, at the beginning of this conversation, Ryan, because I think one of the things that people are missing is that this is actually kind of a wonky way that this bill is going to be passed. You have actually two bills. You have the $600 billion, that's the bipartisan infrastructure bill, and that includes, things for transportation, railroads, broadband infrastructure, etc. But it's a much more, I'll call it paltry. Other people would call it modest. $600 billion. It's just absolutely not enough money, which is the only reason.
Okay, yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I guess I'm not going to leave $600 billion on the table, but like it's not going to get me out of bed in the morning, right? Like that's the only reason we have Republicans that are even engaging with it. And then on the other side, you had the initial, Bernie Sanders was pulling for $6 trillion, as you mentioned in your clip that we played, but it's worked its way, down to $3.5 trillion, which would have at one point been completely unimaginable as like what I would consider still a starting point for this debate, because I'm still completely unconvinced that this 3.5 trillion is going to get through, specifically with a lot of the criticisms that Joe Manchin has been offering, which is what I wanted to kind of get your perspective on. He says that he's not going to vote on anything unless it can be balanced in the budget, which is just an impossibility for a $3.5 trillion infrastructure. We can talk about why balancing the budget's irrelevant. But he also said that, he condemns anti-fossil fuel provisions in the legislation. This is a very big priority to a lot of progressives. The Sunrise Movement did a lot of campaigning to try and get something from Joe Biden in it, even though I think it's woefully inadequate again. So I'm just wondering if you could lay out a path to victory for people.
Right.
What do you think is the best possible outcome? Do you think we get 3.5 if you combine, with 2.9 and the 600 billion? I'm wondering, how do you see this actually playing out, and what can people actually expect to come to fruition?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think actually people should now kind of put themselves on record, and they should your viewers should say like, all right, you know what? If they do get 3.5 trillion, let's say, because right now 4.1 is on the table. If they get 4.1 trillion dollars through, am I willing to say that that was cool, like that? Okay, I will. Like, is that enough?
That would be cool. I will say that.
Right. So if it does happen, and it's like, I didn't think that could happen, but you know what? It happened, and good. Then let's figure out how that happened so we can continue to do more stuff like that. So I think that's a good starting place to say like, okay, that's our marker. Like, we don't necessarily believe this is going to happen, but if they can do this, well, good on them. Which would be, for a lot of people, the first time they said good on Democrats in 40 years, for the most part, because they've barely done anything to give you reason to say that. So here's what I think is going to happen. I think the bipartisan package will fall apart because you only need one reason. And one reason would be Maggie Hassan is up for re-election in New Hampshire. She would love nothing more. She's the most vulnerable Democrat. She would love nothing more than to be able to tout that she struck a bipartisan deal with all of these Republicans. And as a result, you in New Hampshire are getting fiber upgrades, getting this bridge fixed, the hospital, this, that. That's her re-election campaign. I worked with Republicans because she's the kind of Democrat that feels like in New Hampshire, which is trending more Republican, even as New England is pretty Democratic. They have a Republican legislature now. They have a Republican governor. She's behind in the polls if the governor Sununu runs. She feels like she needs to portray herself as somebody that works with Republicans to, quote, get things done. And that would be her ad the whole time. I worked with Republicans. I got stuff done. Mitch McConnell does not want her to have that advertisement. And so he's going to do everything he can to, and not just her, but others, but she's the primary one that he wants to knock out. He'll do everything he can to get other Republicans not to join on. And so because you need 10, it becomes very hard to start to do the math. Like Rob Portman, he's, this Ohio senator who's retiring. He seems like he's in. Mitt Romney, he didn't care what Mitch McConnell says. He wants to do bipartisan stuff. He's in. Murkowski, Collins. Okay. Where are you going to get 6 more? Like, even if you find 2 more, where are you going to get 4 more? So I think it will start to fall. I think it will start to fall apart for that reason. And then they will take the stuff in there that Democrats liked, and to be nice to Republicans, because they do this thing in the Senate where even if a Republican doesn't vote for something, they'll still put it in because they like it when the Republican then goes out and brags back home that they voted, that they got this thing in, and then they'll do an ad. Look, Republicans do like us. So one of the things that's in there is like a ton more money for the IRS, and that becomes what they call a pay for, which, as you said, Joe Manchin wants the whole, and Mark Warner, they want the whole 3.5 trillion, quote, paid for. So that's a couple, that adds up to a giant pay for the IRS money in there. Then all the other stuff that's in that that's in that bipartisan bill that Democrats want, then they move it into the reconciliation package. And so then then you still could wind up with the same 4.1 trillion, except if there are some things that only Republicans wanted, those might get stripped out they might not make it from the bipartisan to the reconciliation package. And so for people who don't know the difference, like how familiar do you think your viewers are on what reconciliation is?
I would say that we're pretty familiar, but even I find myself getting into the weeds on this kind of shit. And there's there's the multiple different voting periods where because at first it goes to the committee, and then there's a period where everybody can add their amendment. And I just know that it gets really wonky and really messy. So if you want to do a quick Reader's Digest on that process, that'd be great.
Right. The kind of simple version is it's called budget reconciliation because it's supposed to only deal with issues that affect the federal budget. And so everything, in order to get something in there, you have to argue that its primary purpose is budget related. And so you had this big argument over the minimum wage. If you change the minimum wage, it will have this effect on the budget. And Bernie and all of Bernie's staff and other budget committee staff were convinced that it was fine, that this was legit. And then this staffer, who's a parliamentarian, casts a ruling that no, that's of secondary importance. So I'm not allowing this in.
And then Joe Biden doesn't fire them because he actually doesn't want the $15 minimum wage.
Right. And so the way that you have to counteract that, either fire them, but then you need 50 votes to fire them, and Manchin's not going to agree to that. The parliamentarian does not make a ruling. She wants to think that it's a ruling. It's not. It's her opinion. And so the chair, who can be anybody, like Bernie Sanders can sit in the chair in the Senate. Technically it's the vice president if she wants to, but usually it's not. But let's say the vice president is in the chair. Somebody would say, point of order, minimum wage does not fit through reconciliation. And then Kamala Harris would say, parliamentarian, what do you think? Parliamentarian says they're correct. It doesn't. But then Kamala Harris says, as the chair, I disagree. I rule that it is eligible to go through under reconciliation. Then Republicans say, we object to that. And in order to overturn the ruling of the chair, you need 60 votes. And that's why Bernie didn't just lose by 8. He got 42 votes for his minimum wage attempt to get it in. He needed 60 because Harris had stuck with the parliamentarian. So you need the chair because they don't have 60 votes. So you need the chair, who would be Harris or somebody else, to say, no, this is in. And then Republicans can try to take it out. And then even if Manchin votes with Republicans, they don't get to 60. So right. The issue was not just that they didn't care about the minimum wage, but I think that's part of it. People like Hassan, like it's not just Manchin. You had like a lot of those cinema, but then also Hassan, Tom Carper, like a bunch of them are under the influence of the National Restaurant Association that has really convinced them that if you mess around with this tipped wage, that you're going to blow up the entire restaurant industry. And it's hard because so many senators, like they spend so much time at restaurants. Think about what a senator's life is. And at home, like they know all of these restaurant owners. And they're like buddies with them because they spend every night at this restaurant. And so it's not just the money and the influence, but like one of the few like human relationships they have are with people that own restaurants. And the people who own the restaurants are telling them, if you raise this tipped wage, we're going out of business. Don't do it to us. Please don't do it to us. And so they're so rich and elite that they think that when they're talking to a restaurant owner, that they're talking to a regular person. Yeah. It's like you're not talking to a regular person. You're talking to somebody that owns a restaurant.
Well, can I get in here real quick, Ryan? Yeah. Since we're talking about the minimum wage and everything, obviously in that clip, and seemingly you've given a lot of credit to Bernie Sanders and to the progressive wing of the party for being able to affect this sort of change. But that brings up an interesting, question as far as the minimum wage goes. In your opinion, do you think that people like Bernie and leaders of the progressive movement have continued to fight hard enough to ensure that these kind of provisions remain in Biden's agenda, things like a $15 minimum wage or the public option, which seemingly has been totally, obliterated at this point? There's other issues going on, like these marches for Medicare for all, which a lot of people are disappointed that, AOC and Bernie Sanders, et cetera, have not promoted or advocated for. It seems like a lot of the things they ran on, they've just decided are no longer possible in the administration of Biden. And I'm just wondering if you think that's an accurate assessment, or if you think that, or at least understand people's frustration, why they're not being more vocal about some of this, lack of action. Another one that comes to mind is Joe Biden unilaterally taking cannabis off of the Democratic Party platform, the legalization of cannabis, something that pretty much everyone else on the Democratic primary was in favor of, even like Kamala Harris as vice president, Cory Booker, et cetera. All these characters that seem super centristy, that was one thing they were in favor of, and Joe Biden unilaterally took it off. And I personally was super disappointed to not hear more vocal resistance to that from the progressive wing of the party. I was wondering if you agree.
Yes, and so I think people have to be able to say and believe two things at once, that and also do it with the humility that we don't know necessarily. So Bernie Sanders is making the calculation that the public option is done, like that, and that Joe Biden's not going to do it. That he has caved on that promise, that it was never a believable promise in the first place, that he only put it on his campaign website because 17 of the 20 Democratic candidates were publicly supporting Medicare for all, so he had to pretend that he was going to support some version of it, but that he's deeply hostile to it, and that the insurance industry and the healthcare industry has a particular ire for the public option that is going to bring an amount of heat that Sanders doesn't think he can overcome without Biden's support too. Like if it's the White House and Democrats against the healthcare industry and the insurance industry, then Bernie would argue, then you have a shot at taking on the insurance industry. But without the power of the bully pulpit of the White House, and with the White House practically actively hostile to it, then you have two choices. You either say, you know what, I'm not gonna win that fight. I'm gonna find out where I can win on other fronts. Or you say, you know what, this is such a fundamental betrayal that I'm just going to call him out regularly and say, you ran on this, you need to deliver on this. And I think you can argue both sides. Like I think that it's fair to say that if he had decided that he was just going to go to war over this and say, look, these are the things that you argued for, that you ran on, that you were elected on, you're not delivering them. I'm not, I'm the 50th vote in the Senate. You want to nominate judges? Well, guess what? I'm not giving you any judges.
Yeah, I think that
you want to like that's a reasonable. I think that's a fair
Well, yeah, and just to jump in, because I think that you're right that you could argue both points in that, because personally, I think it's clear to everybody listening, like I support a scorched earth tactic, right?
Right.
And that's
good.
have
Like you need that.
yeah, but I also think that Bernie Sanders has a very different temperament than I do, and he has demonstrated that long before he ever ran for president. Right, he was called the Amendment King for a reason. He has always, like you said, kind of dreamed big, vocalized very big dreams of revolution, and I think that sometimes it's difficult for people to see him say, "We need a political revolution," which we absolutely do. We need to give everybody healthcare, which we absolutely do, and then look at the cards on the table and be like, "This is my best move." Which is to, okay, fuck, I can't even reduce the, I can't even reduce the age of eligibility, but I can give people hearing aids. I can give them dentures, those kinds of things that I can sneak in there, that it would be so odious for Joe Biden to come out and be like, we can't afford this. Like, people can't have hearing aids, old people particularly, because they vote so much. So it would just be suicide for him to come out and try and finger wag about that. So I think that's a balance, right? It's a strategical difference, but it's one that I've always probably had with Bernie Sanders. I just, as I, become more, set in my own convictions, I notice my disagreements with him on that front more.
Yeah, I think I think there's some truth to that. Just wanted to jump in real quick, but I also want to point out that Bernie talked about being the organizer in chief, and it always really annoyed me that he acted like that was only going to be possible if he became president. We can still have protests. We can still organize under a neoliberal like Joe Biden. And as the Civil Rights Act proved, even a president like Lyndon B. Johnson was still able to pass this legislation when there was a movement in the street. What bothers me about Bernie is that he seemingly doesn't care about fostering that movement in the street. Again, we have these marches for Medicare for All coming up later this month. The squad, Bernie, they haven't said a peep about it. And so while I agree that right now with Joe Biden as the executive, he's pretty unmovable on this issue. But who's to say that with a real mobilized movement in the street led by the likes of Bernie, that wouldn't change the needle, or at least move it in the right direction, at least move the conversation in the right direction. So I guess that's my frustration with Bernie, although I certainly understand what you're saying, Zach.
Yeah, and he gets that. Like if you read the who was it? The New York Times columnist, Maureen Dowd, went up to Burlington and interviewed him recently. And as she actually pressed him on this, she was like, there are a bunch of people to your left who are frustrated that you're not, going harder at Biden. And Bernie just shrugs and he's like, I can't do a very good Bernie. He's like, can't please all the people all the time.
My good friend Joe. Can't please everybody.
My good friend Joe. Right. And so that's the other thing. He signaled the entire campaign that this is what he was going to do if Joe Biden was elected. And I also think that what's one of the things that's going on with Bernie and with the squad is that they're just not used to asking for things and getting a yes. Like Bernie was, after that $1.9 trillion package back in February or whenever that was, he was just giddy. Like his step through the Capitol was just, he was walking on clouds. He had never been in a place where he could, like you said, dream big things and then write them down on paper in the tens and hundreds of billions and then pass them into law. And so I think I think he was intoxicated by that, and that tempered his hostility, which, like you said, isn't naturally part of him anyway. And
here, let me just cut in real quick, Ryan, because I think this gets to a point of maybe disagreement we have over this whole thing. So you're saying that it essentially successfully tempered his hostility, which in my opinion would not be a step in the right direction as far as enacting some of these long-term progressive goals, things like a Green New Deal, things like Medicare for All, things that are going to require a little bit more pressure, you know what I'm saying, than the kind of behind the scenes maneuvering which enabled this infrastructure deal to potentially happen.
Right.
So I guess that's all I'll say.
Yeah, and if he were here, I bet he would say that this $4 trillion package, if they get it through, is a massive down payment on a Green New Deal on a scale that nobody would have thought possible 2 years ago.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about the climate aspects of this infrastructure package, and if you think it goes far enough? I think everyone right now is kind of collectively freaking out every time we open Twitter. There's some like horrifying ecological disaster going on. The ocean's on fire, the streets are flooding, et cetera, et cetera. Do you think this package even comes close to meeting the moment when it comes to environmental climate stuff?
It depends on what the definition is, but like scientifically and objectively, like no, like nobody in the world is meeting the moment. Like, we are at what, 418 or 19 parts per million right now,
which is crazy because just a little fun fact for the audience, we have 365, the climate movement, because that was supposed to be the point of no return,
right,
and we've passed that 50 parts per million.
Yes, we are well past the point of no return, which means that not only do you have to like dramatically scale down emissions like tomorrow, it's like today, you also have to start pulling carbon like out of the air, like through whether it's agriculture, reforestation, some type of whatever other kind of technological solutions. Like in Iceland, they're now like pulling carbon out of the air and pumping it in the ground and turning it into limestone. Like if you can, like, then you don't have to store it. Like, because the big problem with carbon capture isn't the capture. That's easy. The problem is the storage, and the storage is can be energy intensive. It's dangerous. Is it going to sneak right back out? But if you can turn it into limestone, like that's a game changer if you can do it at scale. So like there are things on the horizon that give some hope, but you have to scale it massively and rapidly, because the reason they call it a point of no return, as probably a lot of your viewers know, it creates these feedback effects that you have the Arctic on fire. When you have the Arctic on fire, then you have the tundra there. You have the tundra thawing. And when you have the tundra thawing, you have methane that's been locked in ice for 2,000 years seeping out. Methane is like 100 plus times, more powerful as a greenhouse agent than carbon even is. And so if that's just like hissing out of the ground, then it doesn't matter if you switch, from a gas powered car to an electric car, because you're pumping more methane out just out of the Arctic. If the rainforest down in Brazil, the Amazon, is now a net producer of carbon rather than a net that one of the few sinks left on the planet, it's very hard to like have any hope, period, for the future. And so that's why there is so much kind of dissonance or almost unreality with the conversation, because like I will be the first one to say that people should be proud of getting a $4 trillion deal to this point. And then I'll be the same to say, you know what, $4 trillion deal, unless it comes with some like revolutionary changes in our energy economy, is too late. Yeah. On the other hand, it's never necessarily too late until like extinction. Like it can always get worse.
Yeah,
like,
and I think that's what the fossil fuel industry to some extent wants us to think too, that like it's already too late, so might as well not do anything. Might as well just let them run rampant.
Just burn, baby, burn, party until it's over. Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate your insight on that, Ryan, and I look forward to having you back on to keep breaking this down.
One more quick question.
I was about to. Okay, cool. Question. We can keep you on for a little bit longer if that's cool. Yeah, just a few more questions.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about Tara Reid, actually. You obviously broke the Tara Reid story at the Intercept, and that became quite controversial, obviously her allegations against Joe Biden. And as that story's developed, ironically, a lot of your biggest detractors, I've noticed, actually have turned into Tara's biggest defenders when she's accused of being a Kremlin asset by liberals, which is something that's happening a lot. People seem to have really clung onto that narrative, at least on the pro-Biden side. So I'm just wondering if you have any reflections on the Tara Reid story, if you still stand by her credibility. I certainly think it's a credible allegation, but I was just wondering if you have any reflections on that.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that she started writing for RT was like a gift to the resistance libs who wanted to own her on the Putin charge, and she knew that at the time. But like, she's blackballed. Like, what else can she do? It's not like she has another choice, and like plenty of reasonable people have written for RT. And it's above board. It's not like this is not like some cash payment in a paper bag from some Russian agent. People should Google if they want. I did a piece maybe 2 months ago or so where I took a very close look at the main claims that were being made to undercut her credibility. And if you followed this closely, you know that they are, she lied about having an undergraduate degree. and she lied about having worked for her undergraduate university, on being on the faculty of this university, and that therefore she perjured herself when she made these claims in court. Like, that was when that narrative was put forward by CNN and some other places, like, that was it for her. Like, nationally she just got crushed. Like, well, if she lied about this and she perjured herself, then it must be a lie. So her attorney was able to collect a ton of documents because there are privacy laws that prevent journalists from getting them directly from universities, as there should be. And the attorney shared those documents with me, and it's because she's led such a chaotic life. It took a long time to like sort through all of this, and if people read the story, they'll see how much went into that, because she went to like 5 or 6 different colleges, and she went through a name change because of being the victim of domestic violence, and she was in a special program. Long story short, she did not lie about graduating from college. She didn't. Like, there is some question, and Tara will say this, there's some question about whether or not the school has transferred a degree to her undergraduate. But all of the documents and records prove that Tara had every reason to believe that the university had awarded her a successful graduation and had transmitted that information to her law school. On all of, like, according to the emails I reviewed and the transcripts and other documents, that's just flat out true. Their second claim, that she had never been on the faculty, was also a lie. Like, I got a whole bunch of different documents, some of these from the lawyer, some of them I got myself, that show that the job that she held for the school for about 3 years was considered part of the affiliate faculty. There's just no question about it. Like, documents show it. Therefore, she did not perjure herself, because those are the claims that she made in court. The district attorney dropped that allegation very quietly. You launch that charge in a kind of hair on fire kind of way, and then when you withdraw it, you're like, send an email to Tara and drop these charges. So I have always, like, what I've always said about her case is that she has every right to make, to come forward and make her claim. When I spoke with her, she had a friend, and she had her brother, who she had told, versions of the story, more details to her friend than to her brother. She said she had told her mother. I was the one that got that, found that Larry King, or published a listener found it and sent it to me, but published that Larry King tape. And I think she had every right to tell her story, and then people can decide for themselves whether they want to give it credibility. But by the standards of a Me Too allegation, she had a significant amount of corroboration, which other reporters found, other people that she had spoken to, in years afterward about the incident. So that's kind of where I am on that.
Last question from me, Ryan. I just wanted to, before we had you go, get your over/under on the infrastructure bill. 8 days a week, I'm taking the under on $3 trillion. But do you think it'll be over or under $3 trillion total?
So on the spending side, I will take the over, because when Bernie sent around his $6 trillion thing, like, from what I heard from other Senate offices, was, hey, he didn't include this of ours. He didn't include that thing of ours. So once the money is being spent, like, everybody wants their thing in. And if the price of getting your thing in is to agree to other people's thing getting in, then you're for it. It's the way that executive vice presidents all agree to give each other super high salaries, as long as they and stock options, as long as they get the nice stock options. So I think once it has momentum, it'll wind up over. So that, I'll take the over.
Yeah, well, we can rehash it out when we see what happens. I'd be happy to have you back on the show, Ryan. That would be awesome. But thanks for your time today.
Yep, you got it.
We really enjoyed it, Ryan. And also, just to address this real quick, and I know we're not going to get into any drama or anything, but since Jimmy is in the chat, I figured this will be a good segue into my last question for you. Ryan. And as you see here, he's asking why you even got involved in the Syria discussion with Aaron Mate on Twitter. And I guess this is a good segue into my question for you, which is that it does seem like you really like wading into Twitter battles. It seems like every time I open my Twitter feed, you're fighting with Jimmy Dore or Aaron Mate or Ryan Knight or someone else. And I just find that amusing because you seem so goddamn calm and non-combative in person. Like when we're talking, you seem so reasonable, but then it seems like you're jumping at the bit to engage with these guys on Twitter, which is fine. But I do think in the sense that, some people that you could potentially be reaching with your reporting kind of now have this view of you that otherwise, again, might be reached by your reporting. Again, you're the one who broke the Tara Reid case. There's no reason why so many people on the left should have this intensely negative view of you, but it seems like you've picked a lot of these fights. So maybe that's why. I'm just wondering what exactly you get out of it and why you like Twitter war so much.
Yeah, I say what I think, and I always have. And, sometimes that works to my benefit. Sometimes it doesn't, but I'm never going to change. Like I could tell myself now with particular strings of arguments. Like I can say, you know what? Okay, we've exhausted this one. We're saying the same things over and over again. I'm not gonna engage that particular thing anymore. But if I see something that I think, it's like Brianna used to have a podcast called Somebody's Wrong on the Internet. If I see somebody wrong on the internet, I just can't help but tell them they're wrong and here's what's right. I just can't
I
help
understand
it.
that sickness. I have that with my mouth. I just say it on my podcast. I scream at the fucking top of my lungs. Yeah.
No, and it's like, is it like it's hilarious that people think that it's like somehow to my benefit that like the DNC is like paying me to like do that or something. Like it's like I don't know. It's just this is who I am. Like, and people can like it or not like it. And it does disappoint me that there do now seem to be some people that like are going to see a story by me and think, well, there just can't be true because I disagreed with him on Force the Vote, or
Ryan's a CIA agent.
He's a
CIA. Well, and specifically, I actually saw this happen, Ryan, because you interviewed one of the MPP petitioners, and we've also interviewed the MPP petitioners, and we've shared their stories and kind of done some work in exposing some of the behind-the-scenes shadiness with the Movement for a People's Party. However, when you did that on Rising, I'm not going to lie, 95% of what I saw in response was, of course, Ryan did this. Ryan hates MPP. Ryan's a DNC cheerleader. He's defending the squad, all this stuff. And I'm just like, damn, this interview would have had a lot more weight had Ryan not picked a fight with this entire faction of the left who now is going to refuse to take him seriously. Again, it just seems like you're such a serious journalist. And then sometimes I see you, getting salty when people come after you. And it's like, well, you did kind of wade into this yourself. I think that's fair to say with the Force the Vote stuff, which on your debate with Brianna Joy Gray, you essentially admitted was a good idea after all was said and done. And, so I don't know.
I think the idea of leveraging your vote, like for a particular floor vote on Medicare for all, no, but like the idea of like withholding your vote for speaker or for the rules package for leverage, that's I never said that wasn't a good idea, and I kind of stumbled into that one because I at first I thought I was just like offering helpful insight into the parliamentary process behind it. Even came on the man's show who just put the thing on, happily came on to explain, and I was the one who explained to him that no, like it's not going to elect Kevin McCarthy.
By the way, has he invited you back on, Jimmy Dore? Because he always talks about like, oh, I would whip his ass and all this stuff, but seemingly he did have you on at one point, deleted it, and then won't have you back on again. So no,
he's never asked me.
If you're listening, Jimmy, you can have Ryan back on. I think he's willing to talk to you. I think he'd be more than happy to have this conversation. Maybe you wouldn't. Am I wrong? Would you like to?
I don't know. I mean, a few people have sent me clips where he's like talking about me in weirdly sexual ways. It's weird. And so like,
would you be able to give an example of that?
I don't want to get too graphic, but he like talks about like different fetishes he thinks I have. It's like, it's weird. It's like, what is,
when he talks about your fetish for being humiliated or whatever. Yeah.
But he a few times he's taken it to like a really graphic place. And it's like,
Well, that's fair. Well, if this is Jimmy, I'm not sure if it is. He does say you're welcome back on anytime. So maybe you guys can hash out your disagreements. I certainly think that you guys are both smarter than you probably give each other credit for, have better ideas. So, we're here. Obviously, if you ever want to do a debate, we'd happily moderate it. Again, I think you guys both have more good ideas than you give each other credit for. You're both smarter people than you give each other credit for. But, it is what it is. I just wanted to say that.
I would come on here.
Let's make it happen, Jimmy.
Make it happen, guys. Yeah, and Ryan, also, just to wrap this up a little bit, I know we want to be respectful of your time. But yeah, obviously you're welcome on here, and we disagree, and that's fine. And Gavin and I are happy to have heterodox perspectives on this show. We've had libertarians on this show. We've had hardcore fucking communists on this show that we fucking disagreed with about like how no, China doesn't have the right to take over Hong Kong, all that kind of shit. And I think it's good that because one of the things that Gavin and I always talk about, I fucking disagree with Gavin all the time, right? Like, or not all the time, but a good amount, and we discuss and we chill, and it's whatever, So I think that it's good to have that kind of capability on the left. We're all shit talkers over here, but at the end of the day.
There needs to be more space for people to disagree and be right and wrong and move past it.
Absolutely. Well, hey man, we thank you so much for taking the time to come on our little show and teach us a little bit about some of the wonkery as far as the passing of the infrastructure bill, and we look forward to our next chat with you, man.
Yep, you got it.
Thanks so much, Ryan. Really appreciate it. We'll see you around. I guess I'm here alone. Wanted to quickly do a shout out to the patrons real quick before we go. Looks like Zach might have accidentally closed out, but it's all good. Thanks so much to everyone supporting the show on patreon.com/the Vanguard channel. The link is in that. The link to that is in the description below. We actually just dropped our most recent book club episodes, which is available early for patrons. Sorry, I'm knocking shit over by myself, but yeah, a huge shout out. Thanks so much to everyone supporting the show. Really makes this possible. We give our comrades and Vanguardians shout out at the beginning and end of every live stream. A lot of other cool benefits too. If you guys want to check out, that link is in the description. But yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in today. Really enjoyed the conversation with Ryan, and we'll see you guys later. Peace out.
Yeah, sorry.